You have played Journey before, even if you think you haven't. You and everyone you have ever known has already set foot in this place, seen its dunes and walked its path. Let's do it all again. Together this time. The Hero with a Thousand Faces is a book written by comparative mythologist Joseph Campbell in 1954. In it was the first proposal of the monomyth, a cyclical storytelling pattern that popped up over time in societies with no contact with each other, spread out both across the planet and across thousands of years. It's more commonly known as the hero's journey, the backbone of stories that serves as an imperfect and not quite all-encompassing, but universal pattern written into our very subconscious. Nearly every story you have ever read has in some way fit these steps. Comparative mythology, the field, is exactly as it sounds. It's the study of myth itself, the stories that are spread and refined and changed and perpetuated through every culture on the planet, seeing both where they connect and where they don't. To analyze mythology on a practical level, comparison is not just helpful but necessary, these stories otherwise being impossible to frame within our own existence. The people that made them, spoke them, and changed them are long gone, any evidence that most ever even existed in the first place entirely erased by time. In these individual myths are echoes, wisps of minds we can no longer speak to, but in these patterns is conversation. Webs of humanity strengthening the bonds of people that never met and never had the chance to feel just how like each other they really were. Mythology is a thing deeply important to the story of Journey. It begins with you, a hill, and one single meaningful button, the forward key. Being surrounded by a barren desert, you're given nothing but anticipation for what's at the peak. The walk is excruciating and long, slowing even further once you begin to climb to the top. The camera, near the peak, starts to linger behind, leaving only your unnamed character to see what's truly ahead, until... Journey is a game where you walk towards a mountain. If you enjoy artsy indie games, you have Journey in part to thank for it. Games are still to this day not quite treated like an art form by many, most especially in the West, but compared to how it was in the past, games today have a much wider window of what can be expected of them. In the wake of the games crash of 1983, Nintendo took over Western markets by advertising games not to the whole family, but rather entirely to young boys. It was painted from that moment on as a fancier version of a toy, and for the longest time, it was cursed with that image with every single video game to release. For AAA studios, moving, intricate stories were being made and released, but even those weren't often treating video games as their own medium, but rather just emulating movies via cutscenes with gameplay segments in between them. They were able to separate the game and the narrative as much as possible, separating what made video games, in order to isolate the cinematic story. The player and character, the two agents that can affect the story, were parted. For any new medium or genre trying to break through in popular culture, there was a fight for acceptance that needs to be won. But for video games, they were already a step in the wrong direction. There had, without a doubt, been many artistic masterpieces released before Journey. Shadow of the Colossus, Ico, Braid, each making somewhat of their own splash beyond the scope of just video game culture. But while their artistic impact on what video games can be during their times was notable, Journey's impact was a relative explosion. Indie games, much like any other independent art scene, is where those tried and true methods could really be broken. Wild experimentation followed the indie game explosion, coming with the wake of the Steam Greenlight system, but throughout all of this, for years afterwards, not much progress was made in the wider gaming community. Journey did not come early into that explosion. That game company, the studio to make Journey, is not even quite an indie studio. While they began as one in the time before Steam Greenlight, still taking advantage of the general increase in digital distribution methods, Sony took interest in them after the release of their very first game, Cloud. From then, they were contracted to make 3 new games for Sony's PlayStation Store. Journey is the third in that set, with much higher funding, resources, and development time than most indie games at the time had access to. What we had was one of the earliest examples of indie developers being given access to real funding. Only 4 years after the indie game explosion did Journey finally hit the scene, showing up on the PlayStation Store exclusively in 2012. And yet, the moment it did, it broke the record for the fastest selling game in PlayStation Store history, getting several Game of the Year awards and placements, and its soundtrack being nominated for a Grammy, the first ever video game to accomplish such a thing. In this new and rapidly changing medium, the game to finally break through this barrier of acceptance, if even only for a moment, is, well, Journey is not a long winding experience, being beatable in less than 2 hours. It is not packed with stimulating gameplay, it is not even necessarily a lush story, being entirely wordless and composed of very little explanation at all. A game where your only goal is to keep moving forward. And yet, in spite of going against everything the larger game industry was trying to be, it has become one of the single most influential video games of all time. You are an unnamed cloth creature, and your goal is to get to the top of the mountain you see in the distance. The only thing you know is how to move forward, and the first thing you're shown is that you can briefly slide down hills. Approaching the ruins of a building, you find one thing further. Your character climbs things for you. The basic movement controls seem to cover everything you need to do in the game to progress normally, climbing, sliding, and walking. However, you're given something new, a scarf, one that allows you, briefly, to fly in the air. Beyond you is what seems to be a now dilapidated temple in a small valley, one with a gate blocking your way. You speak via meditation with some mysterious being, one that reveals a chunk of what this place is and what happened to it. The mountain appears to be the source of all life in this desert, of you and of all other cloth beings you've seen so far. Past this gate is 6 major areas, roadblocks and trials on your path to the peak of the mountain. First in all of your challenges is the In the first real area of gameplay, just past the gate, your problem is simple. You need to cross a bridge. The bridge is not built. Fate is a theme that pervades Journey, but unlike many games that try to separate gameplay and story, it's integrated into the narrative of how the video game feels to play as well. Journey is a game with 2 controls, and 2 controls alone that you always have access to. The most dynamic and most in control is your shout. This is the entire way that you're able to interact with the world, being able to heal the long dead cloth stuck in this barren desert, as well as your way to talk to them, being able to be carried and flown well above the world for brief moments of lofty freedom before falling back down to the landscape. The only other control that you always have access to is moving forward. This scarf must be recharged not by waiting, but by moving to the right spots in the environment, given energy through these tiny little cloth friends you make, and giving you a short burst of freedom from the monotony of just holding forward. This cloth gets progressively longer as the game goes on and as you find more of these symbols, allowing you to feel more and more in control of your surroundings and encouraging you to search and study the world you're in. The bridge is contrasted heavily with the wall you're trying to scale. While the bridge stands immobile, the cliff is cast in an endlessly flowing river of sand, making it feel not just unscalable, but actively working against you. The only other bits of gray joining the bridge are metallic lumps in the sand, each accompanied by a dusty ribbon reaching endlessly towards the sky. Your shout, like an extension of your soul, revives and resonates with the ribbons, allowing you to free your species from the unexplained cages they were trapped in. As you look around for more, you might come to notice something odd. There are bridges stretching out seemingly infinitely to your left and right, all dilapidated and falling apart in their own ways. Despite being able to see those other bridges spanning far beyond you, you can't actually make your way to them. Of course you can't. Those who have played video games for most of their lives and know about the limitations of the development process know that there could never be a world where these are explorable, but they are there for a reason. Each is their own story, their own path, one taken many times before by people you will never meet, but one that you, the player, will never be allowed to see here. An invisible wall of wind mounts the closer and closer you get to either side, eventually pushing you away. While you're allowed to see and allowed to ponder, to explore them would entirely defeat the point. It is literally and metaphorically out of bounds, because Journey is not a game about going sideways, a game about choice. Journey is a game about moving forward. The eternal struggle of game design is reckoning with the fact that even for the games with the most expensive of budgets, you can really do very little. Freedom is a commodity slaved over for thousands of man-hours for even the smallest wisps of wide-scale interactivity. And so, for most games with a focus on not just freedom but visuals, narrative, and making sure the gameplay is actually fun, the best you can do is simulate the idea of freedom. The single greatest sense of control given to the player at any given time is through movesets, quite literally the only means we have of interacting with almost every video game in existence. If there is a character and they go to places and do things, a moveset is necessary for games to function at the minimum. The feeling of true freedom of movement has been sought after since the very first platformer, and yet it has a paradoxical relationship with video games as a designed product. Nearly all games have what is essentially a bubble of expectations for what the player can and will do over the course of its existence. Movesets are one of the single greatest indicators of these expectations, and level design is created not just in tune with your movement, but positioned actively against it. It is, on a literal level, the source of conflict and true enemy combating your sense of control. The bridge is not built, you need to find a way to cross it. In any game focused on movement, a level that allows too much freedom becomes painfully boring, while one that leaves too little, well, beating the area is quite simple. On some machines are, rather than small banners, ones that are monstrously large. The gaps between the bridge are formed not by stone, but by a merging of all the ribbons you've freed, allowing you to glide to the top without very much effort at all. To call this difficult would be to outright lie, but the conflict exists for reasons otherwise. By forcing you, the player, to interact with this place, you're given the time and space to mentally wander, to look at the bridges cascading out from you, to find the hidden tablet, to learn the range and extent of your movement. Without the need to interact, you lack the need to linger. At the top of the bridge is a spot for meditation, and with it comes another meeting with the spirit of the past. However, more important is the gate to the The desert comes, in large part, with an even simpler task than the bridge, just moving forward. While the actual play area you can encompass is small, the desert around you is incredibly vast. Compared to the cliffs before, you have almost too much freedom and vision. The desert stretches infinitely around you in all directions, with the only thing breaking from the horizon being the mountain itself. With it once again in your eyesight beyond the bridge, you can start to catch a glimpse of something odd. Glowing lights seem to be coming from the peak. One flies over and beyond your head to somewhere you can't see, while others start to crash directly into the sand. As it turns out, some of the lights to crash from the mountain are the very same symbols that gave you your scarf, the biggest sense of freedom you're granted in the game. While from the prophecy we see that the mountain provides life, it literally provides it in the gameplay. This life piece is stuck atop a collapsed building, and unable to reach it on your own, you need to rely on someone or something else. The creatures you free are not just helpful and adorable, but often necessary to reach your goal. With each one to help you in return, you bond not just emotionally, but functionally. You are made as much of a piece of this environment as everything else, and these interactions give life in a very real sense to this wordless desert you've been placed into. Even further, there's one more aspect of the game that I have not yet spoken about. While it can be played and completed entirely alone, you can have a friend. This is a multiplayer game, or a one more player game. There's no chat function or means to even see the username of the player until the very end credits, but they're there and you can interact with them. One way that you can communicate in lieu of other options is through movement. While it takes developers great deals of effort to make you, the player, be able to affect the environment in interesting ways, that's not the case for other players. We, as sentient beings, are built to respond to our environment, and every form of limited movement we have is a way to communicate to the other. The shout is the most intuitive means. It can be used to catch the attention of your friend, but it can also just be, silly and fun. Look at this, absolutely nothing of value is being transferred here. Is this why dogs bark at each other? I get it now, I think. The shout can also be used to give your friend energy, and for your friend to give it back. The game, what is normally a push and pull between flight and excruciating walking, is tilted heavily on its side, letting you literally lift each other up above the endless desert for longer and longer. You can breathe that freer breath only and entirely through collaboration, and it makes these sweeping dunes a playground instead of a marathon. But just as you're finally soaking in the light of day, you cross into what seems to be a perpetual sandstorm. Two towers churn and churn in an endless cycle, cast in the endless shadows caused by its own work. As you scale it with the help of your newly freed friends, you see that they are the very things powering this creation, trapped in a cage for an unknown amount of time. Their life force is being used to make something, the heads of which seem to have some sort of life of their own. The segments that trapped creatures earlier in the desert before are made from the same material, implying that whatever is being made is designed for that very purpose. However, as you make it to the very top of the tower, and through consulting the past divine spirits, you're able to finally free them. Just past the towers, crossed with the help of your newly freed friends, is one of the most enjoyable chapters in the game. Scripted events in video games are often a way to get around a moveset. A game consisting entirely of the same 4 or 5 button inputs, especially for a world that's trying to be convincingly alive, simply cannot mend a real relationship between the character and the world they're in. When the player can't ignore the fact that Kratos can ram someone through boulders during cutscenes while in gameplay he can't climb a single rock, that dissonance brings you out of the experience. At the same time though, while many gamers wish for and constantly ask for more freedom, more possibilities, more game in their games, it's moments like these that make blockbuster games what they are. Some games are based almost entirely on completely scripted movement, only being able to do the majority of movements in the game, the things that make up the entire gameplay loop at specific locations entirely planned out for you. We exist mentally in 2 realities in gaming culture, and so AAA games simply make both a reality. The illusion of full control is handed to us until the moment it gets in the way of the cinematics. In this section of Journey, you slide, smile. In a stark contrast to the pulling tension of movement in prior chapters, you're sliding down a seemingly endless valley descending to the core of this ancient civilization. Shifting movesets is a common trope in platformer games, with games like Super Mario Odyssey founding its core gameplay on it. Movesets that would not be robust enough for a full experience, but in brief doses give a nice break from the usual gameplay loop. Oftentimes, there's a scripted events button, most often called Interact, the thing that gives you permission to actually leave some effect on the world around you, only in incredibly limited ways. Press F to pay respect, press X to Sean, press middle click to... I'm going to die! Even for things like opening doors or shelves, anytime you interact in a specialized way, your mind connects itself for the briefest of moments to the world you're in. For games not specifically movement focused, this is often literally the only way to create an amount of adventure or tension with the world you're moving around in. Moments where control is actively removed from you for the sake of tangibility and narrative and stakes. Many of these full well could be triggered automatically, but it's given to you not just to add some interactivity, but also because it's not that much more limiting than your regular moveset. Yes, it's basically a mini cutscene, but it's not like you're necessarily much freer than that in most narrative games normally. While you can jump anytime you want, there's only very specific points where it actually matters. The camera can sometimes be moved freely, but the level is aligned to have 1 or more specific chosen places for you to go. Navigation is put in your hands, but to a defined waypoint conveniently handed to you on a map. Any game with a linear narrative, with a place that starts at A and goes to B, can only give you so much freedom. In a truly interactive world, anything could hypothetically happen, but we simply don't have the ability to create something like that, even to this day. Everything done to give players a sense of control, to add difficulty, to give variance is ultimately an illusion. Nearly every game with a story to be told is an exercise in linearity and fate, and we simply put that thought away to be able to engage with the world. The arguably freest game of all time in a genre that best emulates the feeling of freedom, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, actually understands this idea more than nearly any other game in existence. It's known for its ability to be tackled and progressed in a million different ways, with endless physics interactions and enemy nuances and places to go, cleanly and evenly distributing content all across the entire game world. However, if you look at the linearity choke points, the parts where you start at A and need to go to B, there is only one true required destination in the game. Point A is escaping the Great Plateau, and Point B is defeating Ganon. Nothing else is truly absolutely required. Freedom is much more possible in Breath of the Wild because the entire game is the journey, without a moment of required destination. Journey is a very linear game. It is perhaps one of the first W, S walking simulators to ever exist in the way that we think of them now, a term for a game that you simply move and interact through rather than fully playing within. However, in truth, most games are merely a few steps removed from being the very same way. Journey, in contrast to the ever-pulling desperate need to hide that feeling from its audience, decides to bear itself openly. And in that embrace, it explores what our limited control on these worlds can really make us feel. While the entire game is linear like a path through the forest is, this chapter is closer to a roller coaster. You're given small differences in paths you can take, some of which give you more pieces of life, but this entire section is meant in large part just to be fun. After the disheartening visual of that endless prison factory sandstorm, you're able to tangibly feel the newfound freedom of the creatures you freed, them joyfully weaving in and out of the sand alongside you. And this game is just beautiful, right? I can speak at length about symbolism and gameplay mechanics and everything, but you don't need me and my words to experience this excellence. It's present on the face of it. The music and environmental design and adorable cloth creatures, it's just so fun. You're overwhelmed with it all, soaking in this synthesis of so many different art mediums and forms of entertainment combining that you forget. Oh, yeah, I'm going somewhere. I'm going to the mountain. This moment of staring at the mountain is an inflection point. One of the most beautiful shots of the game, but also one of the most sobering. You're so awash in the fun until it hits you just how temporary this moment is. It holds on this view for more than long enough to bring you back to the moment, back to your goal. You begin to slide down again, but this time you know that it's soon going to end. The dunes get steeper and steeper and steeper and steeper until you're completely out of control, careening towards the heart of the city, but you don't get to see it yourself. With the briefest moment of feeling somewhere, at a destination, you quickly fall down, far below the ruins, to a place where, for the first time, the sun isn't shining over you. A place where the mountain has no influence. At the end of every chapter up until this point, you've been granted visions of the past, given to you by what seems to be goddesses or old spirits. Each spells out one new passage of an ornately told but ultimately simple story. As previously said, the mountain, some time long ago, suddenly gave birth to all life in the desert, pieces of light forming the species that you're a part of. Ribbons, too, sources of power and further life sprouted out from the sand, bound by this living cloth and made traversable, filling and powering structures to expand this growing civilization. Either built or formed directly by the light, towers sprung up, given power by the influence of the mountain. However, right at the peak of this civilization, a rot seemed to manifest. Life began to fundamentally break down, to be hunted and captured by giant metallic snakes, from a place seemingly entirely unknown. And, with no way to fight against them, the civilization quickly fell into a dark ruin. As said, Journey is a game about fate, and unlike most games to come before, it understands that truth. These narrative video game worlds are caught eternally in a pulling tension with each other, all due to one thing and one thing only: the fact that you, the player, exists. In order for this world to exist at all, it needs to be justified. Budgets must be set, developers must work for months to years, and for projects geared to actually make money, it must be designed to appeal for the consumer. For that to be interesting, the story and gameplay need to widely appeal, and for that to happen at all, the world that you're in must be in a state of constant conflict. In these underground chambers, the only thing to guide you are the tiniest cracks of light able to shine from up above. Enough sand has fallen into this place to make it as much of a desert as everywhere else, but there is a certain protection that everything to have found itself fallen down here has. While the world up above is vulnerable to erosion, the desert consuming itself and returning everything to sand, the structures and, more importantly, the creatures here remain safe. Your newfound friends, in between the guiding lights, all take their time to guide you along your path. The not-so-moving ribbons are also distinctly different. While on the surface the sunlight is abundant, it only exists in the smallest of pockets here. So while this is merely open air, the life below the surface more closely resembles sea life, seaweed and jellyfish decorating the chambers on your path beneath the surface. On average, the video game worlds we play in are hellish, and it is due to our presence within these places. Many games and shows wrestle with this concept, this aura of conflict that surrounds the main character that seems to cause suffering to everyone around them. Nearly every story told necessitates this in at least some way, but in the case of Journey, an entire civilization had to rise and fall, all just to give you a reason to be here. The underground, though, seems to stand in sharp contrast to the conflict of the surface. In hiding from the light, these creatures have found an oasis, perhaps the only beings in the city still left alive. Which makes you remember, there's a reason that the civilization died. It's easy to forget that danger exists here, because for the majority of the game, it simply doesn't, not towards you at least. These creatures, ones that likely came from the underground by evidence of the statues around you, prey and feed on the life energy of you and your species. What comes next, in stark contrast to the rest of the game, is a stealth section, avoiding the first enemies to ever exist to you, more than halfway through the entirety of Journey. Light, what was just earlier a guide, a source of life, is now a death sentence. The searchlights of these metallic creatures spell disaster for anything to get in their way, but in that proposed danger, this newfound tension, there was one small issue. While most games hinder progress in a way that feels like you're the lone being fighting against greater threats, using resets and quote-unquote deaths, it is impossible to actually die in Journey. You cannot fall off of the map, you cannot be reset, you cannot even take damage in the traditional sense. While most games give you a moveset and use difficulty as a means of controlling it, Journey removes difficulty in place of the actual core of progress, giving or taking away movement. When you get caught by these terrifying metallic creatures, you aren't killed. Everyone knows that's a farce, just the fail state that has to be put into a game for stakes to exist, the conflict that needs to happen. You are fated to reach the end of the game. When you're caught in Journey, you do not die. Instead, you lose the majority of your scarf, and once you've been caught, you can never get it back. The rest of the game is made permanently more restricted, more uncomfortable, less free. In that way, Journey is made more punishing to mistakes than almost any video game out there. And yet, despite you being punished, the truth of the matter never changes. You have a fate, and that fate has been inscribed into both stone and stars. You will reach the mountain. With patience and a bit of luck, you can make it all the way through the underside of the city. You're saved at the last second by a field of protective runes, and in one final meditation, your civilization's story is put to rest. Entirely unable to fight back against the menace of the metallic creatures, the dead fell into and were covered by the ever-building dunes. The sands of time only built higher and higher, until any trace of their life only existed through numerous small graves dotting the landscape. With the influence of the light fading away, only small wisps could manage to return to the ground once again. Wisps that came to form you. The tower is where past, present, and future combine. Despite the fall into the underground feeling unplanned, like an unexpected mistake, you find yourself exactly where it is you need to be, a tower constructed specifically for you to find it. While the past of this civilization has caught up to the beginning of your story, this tower seems to know where it continues from there. Following the theme of light as water, your goal is to ascend by unveiling new tablets, and with each comes more energy that buoys you further and further towards the top. However, on each of these tablets is something very interesting. Depictions of every single chapter of the game, every exact step you have gone through to get where you are now. Comparative mythology is something of a holy grail for comparativists, those who fixate on similarities over differences between myths. If comparison is the goal, then the ultimate achievement would be to find something of an origin point. The proto-myth is a hypothetical story, event, or commonality between us as people that led to every branching myth that we're aware of today. It could either be a literal event or universal part of our world, like the sun rising and falling in the sky, or something more universal, some undeniable part of our very minds that seems to create these patterns and seems to endlessly pass them down. There is almost certainly no single proto-myth, but likely a combination of many things, either worldwide events or universal parts of our world mixing together with our minds, combining the things that bind us externally and internally all in one. Collections of words spiraling and interlinking into a web much stronger than any one person could make. What is spoken about now in comparative mythology is proto-myths as patterns, each one a common point in that growing constellation of storytelling, each one analyzed to its own specific origins and delved into with the goal of finding out what makes it so special. You had what may have appeared to be many different routes, thousands of potential bridges, but the world knew exactly where you were destined to go, and now you're here. And finally, at the top of this tower, when filled to the brim with light, you're finally able to meet this spirit physically, outside of visions, face to face. What surrounds you now through a vision is the mural. the tablet shown to you, the past, present, and now future combined into one full circle, a circle at the top of the tower. You see the fall of the civilization, your arrival, your trials, your triumphs, all in one unbroken cycle. Perhaps more importantly though, you also see something else. What's beyond? There is just one more segment past this point, one without a clear ending given. Right beyond this tower, right through the gate ahead of you, is the mountain. The mountain is not a place that you survive. While every other area in the game uses brief moments of extra movement to make you feel free and hopeful, the mountain is where all hope goes to die. Your scarf, the source of power lifting the chains of this world, begins, slowly, to freeze. In fact, everything living around you seems to already be long frozen. You can briefly bring them back to life with a shout, what would normally give a flourish of energy, but they soon return futilely back to their lifeless state. Insurmountable winds blast through the cramped crevices that you're forced to trek through, a seemingly endless valley that has taken the lives of creatures far stronger than you've ever been. Your weakened state only makes the trek seem more impossible, your only chance of moving forward coming through the towering gravestones that litter this long, deadly path. Each death of some great being before you grants you a mere few extra feet against the crushingly strong forces trying their hardest to hold you back. In most games, when it comes to death, control is in no way actually taken from you. We get to glimpse into this hypothetical world where it happened for all of a few seconds, your impact on this world fading and that world fading alongside it. But it's understood from all parties for what it really is, purely imaginary. It cannot possibly give you permanent consequences without some way to find a real, satisfying conclusion. Everyone simply engages in the fiction within fiction that death has consequences, that there is tension and a reason to fight with desperation. If death truly means the end, then the only true death in a game is not when you lose to the game's world, it's when you succeed. When the game has no more reason to exist, a true final nothingness casts over everything. In that way, death in video games often has very, very little stakes up until the very end of the intended experience. Each straight through the mountain pass is unbearably long. You've been without any powers for the entire game, but only now have you felt truly powerless. The frost consuming all life on the mountain is creeping its way onto you, your cloth frosting at the edge, your shouts weakened, and your flight becoming increasingly shorter. The wind doesn't stop you, but it does slow you, and in this place, that is just as dangerous. While the underground is the home of those serpent monsters, they have no reservations about being in the sky. You see them hovering, hunting in the distance over and over, the life lucky enough to avoid the frost falling right into the hands of these monsters. This is a place that drains everything. You're given, on occasion, reprieves from the endless winds. One a narrow ravine, peppered with the graves of your fallen brethren, another a heated lamp restoring your life for the rest of the trip ahead, and one further a river frozen in time, caged off from the chaos of your surroundings. However, with each oasis you're given, the next stretch through hell is harsher than the last. Each and every field comes with less cover, more danger, and constant winds. While you start with at least the assurance of protection from the monsters, you quickly enter a wide open space past the ribbon bridge, one patrolled by an especially insistent monster. Your primary form of cover is the corpse shells of the ones that came before it, single segments as the smallest shelters from everything around you. Not strong enough to prevent the frost, but just delaying long enough to keep pushing forward. Past the final oasis is what seems to be the final sign of civilization, a pass on the side of the mountain, one that seems to be impossible to actually exist. This was something built entirely for travel, for making this exact journey, having to be built by someone or something that cannot be killed by the perpetual snowstorm. Even then, weather has taken its toll over the years, with holes carved out from the path. The wind is at its harshest here, being nearly impossible to just barely inch your way to the next piece of cover. But finally, bending the temple wall, you're left with a stunning sight. The mountain peak, closer than it has ever been. The path here has already worn you down, and there is nothing to hide behind anymore. There is nothing in sight but snow, the peak, and the countless graves surrounding you. Each before you a traveler, one much like yourself, and each one succumbing to the impossible odds. The wind doesn't just push you back, but throws you violently back and forth, taking everything in your power to not tumble, wasting your final ounces of energy. The game, through all of the freedom introduced, has been stripped back down to you, a hill, and one single button. And even then, that button is starting to fade too. As you push forward slower and slower, the graves begin to thin, from many to some to few to eventually none, you being the furthest to have ever made it. Your body begins to slow, and as it does, the light of the mountain seems to disappear. Able to be seen from the very beginning of the game, despite how close you are, it's infinitely far away now. The camera patiently lingers behind you as you slow to a shuffle, then a drag, then a crawl. Your control in the world, the life of this universe, falls away. The traveler collapses. You've finally suffered a true death. In a game spent chained to the ground, moments of freedom coming in the briefest of flashes, the ground has become entirely impossible to see. You are infused with light, saved by the spirits that have guided you along to the point where you are now. As if you're in resonance with the world itself, nearly everything from the creatures to the very air you fly through recharges your flight. While toiling away in the belly of the city, dodging monsters and having your sense of freedom literally ripped away from you, your scarf now flows entirely off of the screen, becoming nothing more than an afterthought. Every single moment of this, both as the traveler and as the player, is pure euphoria. With everything in the game until this point being built on restriction, your freedom here feels tangibly like divinity itself. The shackles of gravity are undone before your very eyes, and the narrative is transferred into and through your control on the game itself. Every section of the game is revisited for brief moments. You glide above land bridges, slide down the snowy mountainside, swim up through the faux water, grazing the jellyfish and riding alongside the cloth version of the very monsters that hunted you. These obstacles exist only for the sake of play, entirely optional now, and yet something most people willingly choose to do again, gliding their way through memory lane. In what feels like the first time since the desert that you've seen the full sky, now a perfect blue, the land left to fly over seems to finally be running out. At one final gate overlooking a small pond of water is a divine beam of light, like a god themselves is staring down upon you. And, much like the burst of energy to make you ascend for the first time, you are engulfed in a pure glow as you make your way across the final gap. A complete void below you, but hardly even noticed. Finally landing at the peak is a somewhat sobering moment. The scarf you were given at the very start of the game dissipates, jumping and flying no longer a necessity. Again, you are left only with the shout and the forward key, and just one more place to go. That light you've been chasing is now surrounding you entirely, near blinding and all-encompassing. The walk, nearly as slow as the crawl up the mountain, is, this time, a peaceful moment. In a way, though, you're walking to your death in both. Whatever is inside the mountain is the end of the world, the end of your influence, and as such, the end of all reason for this place to exist. The sound of everything but the music fades away with the light, the medium itself consumed by the destination finally being reached. Our view into this world, the camera lingers behind the walls meant to hold the traveler, not us, within the game world. They begin to walk on their own, into a place we aren't allowed to, or perhaps aren't able to see. As the glow of the mountain consumes them whole, all that's left is light, as everything finally comes to an end. When the game first released, there was a relative chaos in story interpretation. Despite being such a smashing success for hardcore, casual, and non-gamers, very little consensus was reached on what the story was actually specifically about. Journey is a game about mythology, fate, and prophecy. It's a game about friendship, about life, and deserts. It's a game about cycles or something. But if you were to interrogate the core of the game, the soul at the very center of what is trying to be told to you, you run into some trouble. Theories circulated about religious interpretations and all other sorts of things, but even those were hard to specifically justify in one way or another outside of imagery, for the simple fact that there was no textual evidence to really support anything. What Journey undoubtedly is, however, is a deeply moving experience. There must be something tangible in the process that Journey takes us through, something so core to us that despite no actual information existing to latch onto, we experience something very real regardless. What each person gets out of the game's experience seems perfectly tailored to them, each detail to stand out being a natural reflection of the landscape of that person's mind. Despite the beautiful visuals and soundtrack and clear intentionality, Journey seems to simultaneously be a blank canvas. The natural conclusion to come to eventually is that Journey, the game, was not designed to be a creation, but to be a process of creation. As you've likely pieced together by now, while the game isn't quite about mythology, mythology is important to Journey for a reason. While the backstory of the game is given to us via hieroglyphs, it's deeply important to note that it does not end with the civilization turning to dust. It continues into our time, the one we get to play through. The story in that Tower of Light we ascend is not a separate story, it's a continuation, left off at the exact moment that we arrived. Most often, prophecies and hieroglyphs serve as symbolic representations of much more complex stories and moments and feelings, remnants left over from lives so nuanced that they could never be accurately represented. However, with each tablet revealed as you ascend the tower, you may realize that despite each entire chapter of the game existing inside one single picture each, the entire summation of its story is shown more or less without leaving really anything out. In Chapter 1, you arrive in the desert. In Chapter 2, you construct a bridge made of cloth. In Chapter 3, you move through a desert and up a tower with your cloth creature friends. In Chapter 4, you slide down a hill. In Chapter 5, you enter the underground city and avoid the metal snake monsters. The game of Journey and these prophetic glyphs have the same amount of dialogue and plot progression. In the case of the backstory, speaking plot point for plot point, it has even more story than the actual game does. The only real difference between these tablets and the game of Journey itself is that one is written down and one is made for us to play through. Journey is not a cycle of the monomyth like every other iteration of video game narrative, yet another reincarnation of the hero's journey with different names and faces and story beats within that structure. Instead, it is, in a literal sense, the hero's journey, the structure itself. Journey being named as simply as it is not some random artsy choice, it is the entire point of the game. What is presented to you is a literalization, a world constructed entirely for the purpose of symbolizing and showcasing the simplest, most beautiful painting of the monomyth that you yourself can take part in. One of the single most talked about elements of the game, and perhaps the most important for the sake of its emotional impact, is the game's original soundtrack. Each track is beautifully tailored to every moment, being filled with an anachronistic blend of timeless strings, modern ambient, distant horns and drums and woodwinds, making every song feel as big and as small as it needs to be at any given moment. If you were to look up this soundtrack as many people have, you'd get something that hardly exists at all in the game of Journey itself: names. The soundtrack has names for its songs, as most do, but rather than calling it something as brutalistically simple as Gameplay 1, Gameplay 2, Gameplay 3, and so on, or as individual as Resurrection, Star Jump, and Reach for the Summit, the song names are all connected in a deeply interesting way. Nascence, the Call, Threshold, the Road of Trials, Temptations, Descent, Atonement, the Crossing, Reclamation, Nadir, and Apotheosis, with 6 confluences weaved between them. There are exactly 17 songs that play over the course of the main game, with nearly every single one named in some way in relation to the steps of the monomyth. Not anything within the story, but the structure of storytelling itself. If you're familiar at all with Joseph Campbell's 17 Steps, Apotheosis is not the final one. In fact, it is hardly past the halfway point. Out of the song names presented, only 6 or arguably 7 are actually steps in the hero's journey specifically. The Call, Threshold, the Road of Trials, Temptations, Atonement, and Apotheosis, and arguably the confluences themselves. Between these are songs of additional meaning and significance. While the game is undoubtedly a realization of this cycle, it has more to speak on than just a recreation of it, and we can peek into these cracks through the meanings of the remaining songs, including the 18th and final one. Nearly all stories play pretend in a very specific way. They assume that the world being open to your mind is one that has existed for thousands to millions to billions of years, that we are being shown a brief window into a long living place. Even further, we enter into the life of someone that has lived for many years before this point as well, often implied to have a life stable enough most of the time as to not require a story being written of it, only the most conflict-ridden points of time being given that distinction. However, for the traveler in Journey, we come to learn by midway through the game that we were not joining this being as it arrived to this civilization. It was born at the very spot that we began controlling it. Nascence is the first song in the OST, the very opening of the game. The word means to come into existence. Each confluence coincides with the meeting of the goddesses, or potentially past spirits if the composer's view holds some weight. The 3 songs after the final confluence, where you learn of your fate to face the mountain head-on, are The Crossing, Reclamation, and Nadir. Reclamation is a song that plays in the few spots of oases on the mountain, those brief moments of warmth that allow you to keep moving just a bit longer. As for The Crossing and Nadir, they seem to be steps borrowed from more modern interpretations of the hero's journey. The approach, a conflict you must face as you get close to your destination, and the ordeal, the final conflict that decides whether you live and grow or die where you stand. Nadir is an astronomical term, meaning lowest point. It's the song that plays as you do die where you stand, the peak closer in sight than it has ever been. And then there's the credits. The next step in the hero's journey, the one we don't get to see, is the ultimate boon. In the monomyth, this is the thing that was ultimately sought after, the reason for the entire journey. It is, presumably, what is inside the mountain. As on the nose as it is to state this, the game is literally about the journey and not the destination. It is only a showcase of the middle of the monomyth, that journey into the unknown world, and it's for a very specific reason, one we'll speak about in a moment. What we do get to see, however, is the journey back. The credits are scored by the song I Was Born for This. Unlike every other song in the game, this one has lyrics. Each section of the song is sung in a different language, the native tongue of various famous myths and historical figures. The first is from the Aeneid in Latin, then Beowulf, the Iliad, the Japanese poet Matsuo Basho, and the tagline of the song, I Was Born for This, being the final words of Joan of Arc, speaking to destiny and fate. The song is a connecting point of cultures all across time and nations, and serves as the backdrop for the journey home. Our traveler, now a being of pure energy like the ones we've seen throughout the game, begins to fly back through the mountain, down the tower, under the city, over the ruins, beyond the factory, above the dunes, and back, right down behind that very first hill in the game. We watch the nighttime slowly turn to day as the credits come to an end, and as the sun peeks over the sky. Just like it's your fate to reach the mountain, it's further your fate to do it all over again. Due to the short nature of the game, it's not just possible but fairly common to decide to return to it and play through the entire thing again in one sitting. What begins as a life-changing experience becomes a comforting one, its soundtrack, visuals, and co-op experience being a welcoming hug and trip down memory lane, a way to re-experience what you originally had, and to pay mind to each and every moment of not just the literal journey, but your internal one too. And even further, very importantly, you get to share these moments with a nameless friend. These artistic storytelling cycles manifest over and over in different people and places and structures, but art as a whole happens as a community, and Journey gives you the ability to do so. While everyone was new to the game around launch, there is still to this day hundreds of people online that serve as shepherds for newer players. Often adorned in the white robe, the one you get for collecting all life pieces, they serve almost as a tour guide. They show you what this world has to offer, what to collect, what to see, and where to go. Even for a pair of first travelers, the moments shared together far outweigh how they feel to be experienced alone. There is truly two different video games played here, changing entirely in its DNA the moment you have a companion. The mountain's design is rather special. It has two peaks, but is rounded off at the top of both of them. As revealed in the design notes, the mountain is shaped this way for a reason. It's meant to resemble the embrace of two people, two bodies in a state of permanent connection. The source of life, the power of the mountain, is, in a way, love itself. Art is the interaction between two or more minds. You connect to the artist, but you can also use art to connect to each other. In this game, there's no reason not to keep moving forward, no specific thing keeping you tied to this world, except for another player. You can mess around with someone, sit around, do cute little rituals, explore. Their presence, the presence of another living being to experience this art with, gives a whole new dimension to it. Not many games out there have co-op with strangers against no opponent at all. We're so often compared against each other for the sake of play and competition, but we all see and know the consequences of that. Online play is so commonly seen as unfixably nasty, but Journey is this oasis of almost intimacy with each other. You're only able to communicate in shouts, you don't even have the privilege of a name, a customized look, anything that states that you are a person outside of this place. No, to them and them to you, both are just travelers on the same path. By removing our individual senses of identity, we exist in Journey in the context of Journey. Our need to feel special melts away into the sand. All we can do is take this path together. Once the tools and societal pressure to be competitively selfish disappears, we become as we always have been, travelers together, helping each other across wind, sand, and snow. While the song names are based off of the steps of the hero's journey, what's important to note is that a lot of what happens in those steps are simply not communicated in Journey's actual story. The hero's journey as a story is not based exclusively on external conflicts. Just as much as the hero struggles with the outside, they struggle from within as well. And yet, our nameless, wordless, expressionless travelers simply can't provide that for us. In lieu of the protagonist having that progression, that conflict is placed on you, the player. Most games place you in the position of the observer, feeling secondhand emotions from the actions and reactions of the protagonist. However, outside of those brief moments with the goddesses, you are the only being controlling every action the traveler takes. It only exists to be an extension of you, a tour guide through this world, and a way to tangibly interact with it. Truthfully, this is the goal of all stories, to be a conduit to move you, to change you, to give you new perspectives and ideas. It's simply that, like everything else in Journey, it does away with any need to pretend. The directness of this game, through game design to story to philosophy, all serves to connect with you more than any game to come before or after. The names of these songs are as much about each individual section of the world as they are mission statements, detailing the emotions that each song wants to evoke in you and you alone. While the world you travel through is digital, the journey you take within yourself is real. Each moment of connection, each detail of this world lives within you, a projection of emotions and friends and beauty casting into the inside of your mind, becoming real for those fleeting moments where everything else seems to fall away. The music swells and you soar in flight, the world darkens and you shrink yourself. You embody this vessel, these living clothes for your soul to wear if only for a moment. One moment bridging your life before and your life beyond. You are the being that has existed long before this story, in a universe that came into existence an inconceivable amount of time before you did. Journey is merely the special world, one that you transport into exactly for as long as you control the traveler. Once you've found the ultimate boon, you return back to yourself, having changed, if only in a small way. It is hard to imagine, even today, that this game was the success it was. I've spoken of so many weird, fascinating, life-changing, artsy video games in my time on this channel, but absolutely none have had the universality and popularity that Journey did. As said before, it was not quite an indie game itself, at least not in the way we think about it today, but its origins were unique and rooted in indie game design. You could attribute its success to its uniqueness at the time, its budget, its support from Sony, but that simply doesn't tell the full story. 2012 was a year much like any other. The same companies produced the same monumentally popular AAA titles, series tried and tested and proven to sell year after year after year. And yet, in the same breath as the titans of Black Ops, Far Cry, Halo, and Mass Effect is Journey. This single, wordless game made by a small group of people that shied away from every known aspect of what a successful game could be. This is the thing that broke records. No, in my opinion, what made this game successful is the very foundation of why it was made. Every game is inherently exclusionary in some way. Even for the most popular games out there, run through board meetings and playtesting and studies to be as widely appealing as possible, an invisible wall surrounds every game in existence, as well as video games as a whole. Be it difficulty or learning curves or just price, there is more to get into and way more to learn before you can even begin to enjoy gaming as a whole. Journey is a game that doesn't even last 2 hours. The controls are painfully simple, the puzzles are easy, the gameplay is borderline non-existent, and the story is entirely wordless. Yet in this game, in this world, is the connection point of all of humanity. A net cast out across space and time, the invisible patterns that have existed within us since we as a whole have existed. A story constructed of and built on a cycle that builds bridges between every single one of us. Journey was developed, like many of the most interesting games, by people with experience in other art fields, multimedia developers and creative visionaries that simply crossed paths with video games, rather than a life lived within them. Each walk of life brought differences, uniqueness, and experience, but in the process of creating Journey, they focused on what makes them similar. Journey is a wordless playground, walking and flying through the cosmic structure that binds us all, and through that universality, through that connection to the souls of everyone to touch this barren desert, it achieved what no video game quite had before. It broke through. It became the source for artsy, story-centric indie games to sprout from, a place for each new cycle to begin anew, with genuine hopes that these artists might actually see a reward for their efforts. Journey, in a way, has become a proto-myth. A lineage of unique, weird, scrappy excellence can be traced both to and beyond the game of Journey. Just as it was fed into by thousands of years of storytelling, it has continued the path to many of the most beloved games of all time. It's my belief that most progress humanity finds, in both the biggest and smallest ways, is eventually inevitable. If it weren't Journey, there was a chance that another game would have followed that did more or less the same thing. Open up the consumer market for games that reject the need to just be toys and to blend gameplay directly into the message. It's not like Journey was the first to try it, or that game company would be the only group of people to do it. However, with that different timeline would come different games. It would have taken another year, many of the chains of influences would be entirely broken, so many art products only being possible in the briefest of times and circumstances. To me, no video game narrative can or should be a movie or a book. You do interact with these worlds, even if through tiny button prompts or just walking the way the map guides you. The fact that you do the inputs, you guide the camera, you control the pace, it makes you a conduit. There is a connection that forms between yourself and this universe that no other medium we have ever made can quite capture the same way. Journey could be nothing but a video game, and it understands that fact. That means something to me. In its simplicity, we've come to fill in the details. In playing as the protagonist, we've come to fill that internal world. In taking this journey, we've come to change ourselves by the end. Inside our minds are inscribed patterns, tropes and beats and moments that bind all of us together. Myths all borrowing from the millennia of earth and winds and water that carved out the narrative worlds we all travel through. They manifest in different forms, but their core is what draws all of us in. In truth, nearly every story is about climbing a mountain. They struggle in different ways, face different trials, may have their journey be shifted and changed and layered through all sorts of complexity. They might make it, or they very well may die along the way. You as the character are birthed from life, and upon completing your journey, you're awarded with returning to it, no longer existing. Your purpose, your fate as the protagonist, successfully fulfilled. Your fate was scribed onto digital screens with modern glyphs, your fate sealed by proofreading and deadlines, a being controlled by the creator or creators of your universe. Those stars interlinking us create the constellations in Journey's sky, the millions of dunes formed from bits of dialogues from every character to ever exist, crushed and repurposed and reimagined in the minds of the people, the gods, the mountain who modeled it. Each atom in the world of Journey has been dissipated and reassembled in every story you've ever read, stretching back to the first human and forward to the eventual last. The hero's journey is now something you don't just see, but do. We have all taken this journey before through someone else, but now we can do it ourselves. We can set foot in this place like we never have before. The question is, would you like to do it again? I cannot believe that it is finally done. I've been working on this video for so long that I've forgotten what it feels like to not be working on a video about the game Journey. Like the other, 4 or 5 longest videos I've ever made in a row, I intended this to be 20 minutes long, and it ended up being triple that length. And while I think it might be the single best video I've made, it is so nice to not have these thoughts in my head anymore. I will not need to think about Journey forever. But anyways, if this video does not convince you to subscribe to my Patreon, I don't know what will. I understand if you don't like the wait times. I do try to get these videos out as fast as possible, and I feel very bad when they don't come out. But that money every month makes me feel secure in being able to continually pursue YouTube, and it does mean a lot to me. You don't get a whole lot of benefits from it besides supporting me. You get a role in my Discord server that gives you a custom color, and you get your name at the end of these videos and a shout out, which I'm going to do now. But overall, it's just to support me, and thank you so much to everyone who has done so, especially over the past 6 months. Thank you for not abandoning me. With that maybe sappy note, let's get to the shoutouts. So, Patreon shoutouts to Beanie Guitar Guy, Cat Called Blep, Damage43, Dankly Voidly, Edmund Dong, Lucky on Fleek, MF Bitchboy, Wayne Wheeler, R2, Bestest Patron, Celestial Tangle, Chris B, Christian Cook, Fake Milk, Fish 4, Fish 6? I don't know how to read Roman numerals, or just which goes first. Gur Burley, Jacob Falk, Jocelyn, Kevin Paulson, Maiden Batter, MC Logic Master 69, Necra, Auma, Owen McGee, 2 Owens still, Peter Healy, Poetry Stud, Ro Ramden, Robin Michael Becker, Rudy Schubring, Sambro99, Shunks, Cinex the Sysadmin, Ted H, and Touch Fuzzy. Thank you again to everyone who has stuck around, especially my Patreon supporters, and have a fantastic